Shocking discovery of my adoption under the floorboards led to betrayal, theft, and a life turned upside down. Could you survive? If you ever find anything in the house that doesn't belong to you, Benjamin once told me, just throw it away. I didn't listen. And that's how I found the documents that proved my entire life was a lie. It was 6:42 p.m, the kind of evening when the light hits the ocean just right, gold fading into bruised blue, and I was standing barefoot in my rented beach house, prying up a warped floorboard near the kitchen. I just wanted to fix a squeak. Instead, I found a small metal box covered in a fine layer of baby powder. Inside were papers, adoption records, old checks, and a birth certificate that didn't have my name on it. That moment cracked my world open like a fault line. I'd been living in that beach house for 3 years. $1,650 a month, plus the $450 car payment that always hit my account the same day. Benjamin, my landlord, had become almost like family. He'd invited me to barbecues, lent me tools, even shown up with his famous lasagna when I broke my ankle. He had a way of being everywhere, always smiling, always watching. I didn't know then how deep his control went. When I called my dad, Dennis, that night, his voice was unusually quiet. "Nathan," he said, after a long pause. "Where did you find those papers?" "Under the kitchen floor. Why? Do you know something about this?" Another silence. I could hear the faint hum of the television in the background, his usual comfort during rush hour traffic news. "There's something I should have told you a long time ago." That's when I knew. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down. The faint smell of baby powder from the box made me nauseous. Too clean, too sweet, like it was trying to cover something rotten. My childhood memories began to rearrange themselves in real time. Benjamin had been in my life as long as I could remember, the family friend who helped fix our roof, who always seemed to have spare keys. When the kids in our neighbourhood were little, he used to hand out caramel apples and talk about how lucky I was to have such a good father. But looking back, there were cracks. Once, when I was 10, I overheard Grandma arguing with him in the kitchen over a slice of her apple pie. She'd slammed the plate down so hard the crust shattered. "You promised me, Ben," she hissed. He said he'd never find out. At the time, I thought they were talking about money. The next day, I confronted Benjamin. I remember every detail. 9:13 a.m, the sound of the waves slapping against the stilts, the smell of coffee gone cold on the porch table. "Why was my birth certificate under your floor?" I demanded. He smiled with that same, calm, paternal smile that always made people trust him. "You must be mistaken, Nathan. You know how old houses are. People leave junk everywhere. But this has my mother's name on it. My real mother. Who the hell are you?" His eyes hardened. "You should stop digging, son. Some things are better left where they belong." Son. That word hit differently now. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified, the creak of the beams, the hiss of the tide. I kept seeing his face behind my eyelids, hearing his voice say, "Throw it away." I didn't know yet that those papers would drag me into 2 years of police reports, courtrooms, and therapy sessions that would change everything. By the end of it, I'd lose almost everything I owned in my savings, my job, and even my sense of who I was. But right then, all I could think about was how familiar the baby powder smell had been. My grandmother used to use every time she handled the wedding dress in plastic that hung in her closet. She said it kept moths away. I hadn't seen that dress since she passed, but now, somehow, the scent made me think she'd known all along. The first red flag I'd missed was subtle, a call from the county clerk's office 3 years earlier, asking to verify my adoption filing. I'd laughed, told them they had the wrong number. They'd apologised, but the woman's voice stuck with me. Now I couldn't stop wondering if Benjamin had intercepted my mail back then, if he'd been hiding more than papers under those floorboards. I didn't know it yet, but that discovery would unravel a story of forged identities, stolen inheritance, and a man who wasn't just my landlord, he was the one who'd orchestrated my entire life. The week after I found the papers, I couldn't focus on anything. My job performance tanked. I worked remote tech support for a small software company, but every time a client called, my brain would glitch mid-sentence. I'd open my mouth, and instead of explaining why their printer wouldn't connect, I'd hear my own thoughts echo, "Who am I really?" At night, I'd scroll through court record databases until 3 a.m. My chest would tighten when I saw Benjamin's name pop up on old property filings. He'd owned the beach house since 1998, long before I ever met him. The address on some of those documents matched the one on my adoption papers. That wasn't coincidence. That was choreography. When I confronted my dad again, he looked more somehow like the truth had already hollowed him out. He was sitting on the porch of his house in Jupiter, Florida, the same porch where I used to drink lemonade as a kid after soccer games. "Tell me everything," I said. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You were adopted, Nathan. We wanted to tell you after college, but your mother..." He stopped, eyes glistening. "She thought it would destroy you." "Who arranged it?" "Us, already knowing." His lips trembled. "Benjamin, he handled the paperwork. We didn't know the full story." I laughed a harsh, broken sound. "He let my landlord arrange my adoption." "He wasn't just your landlord back then," my father whispered. "He was family." That word burned like acid. The second red flag came 3 days later, during rush hour traffic on my way home from therapy. I'd finally booked a session because the panic attacks were getting unbearable, chest pain, tunnel vision, the sense that the road was shrinking around me. My therapist, Dr. Choi, had told me, you've experienced a severe breach of trust. Your mind is looping the betrayal like a fire alarm. We'll work on grounding techniques. I remember repeating her breathing exercise while stuck on the Minus 95, surrounded by honking horns and brake lights. In through the nose, out through the mouth, I whispered, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. When I got home, there was a package on my gig, not the porch, like usual. The mail carrier had stopped leaving deliveries near the door after I filed a report about suspicious mail tampering. Inside the package, a photo of me as a baby. The back was labelled property of BT. I started noticing more. My doctor suddenly got cagey about my medical records. When I requested copies, he said they'd already been sent to their family representative. I hadn't authorised that. Later, I'd find out he'd been giving Benjamin access to my private medical information for years, citing guardian privileges. I was 23. No guardian needed. That discovery broke something in me. I developed insomnia so bad I'd lie awake until dawn, watching headlights flicker across my ceiling. My mind became a slideshow of every small betrayal I'd ever ignored, the way Benjamin always seemed to know when I was sick, the way he once commented on my prescription changes. One night, I walked down to the beach just to feel the cold salt air slap my face. The waves sounded like whispering voices. I remember muttering to myself, maybe I'm losing it. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. Then there was Marlene, my aunt, my dad's sister, and Benjamin's biggest enabler. When I tried to explain what I'd found, she just smiled that tight, pitying smile. Sweetheart, Benjamin's done so much for this family, you should be grateful. Grateful? I snapped. He stole my identity. She shook her head. You don't understand the kind of sacrifices that adults make to protect children. He kept you safe. Safe. The word made me want to scream. That was when I realised the abuse wasn't just hidden, it was defended. Everyone around me had built a story so airtight that questioning it made me the villain. The nightmare started soon after. In Nam, I was back in the house prying at the floorboards, but the box was empty. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced someone was standing over me. I started locking my bedroom door, double-checking the windows, and plugging my router before bed, irrational habits that felt like the only control I had left. I started missing payments. My $450 car payment bounced twice, my rent was late, and Benjamin's tone shifted, polite but edged. You've got to get your finances under control, Nathan, he'd say. Wouldn't want to lose the house. That wasn't concern. That was a threat. One evening, I came home to find a note taped to my door, "Stop digging, you're not ready for the truth." My hand shook so badly I dropped my keys. The sun was setting with that eerie orange glare cutting through the hallway. I could smell something faintly familiar on the paper. Baby powder. That's when I knew I wasn't imagining it. Someone had been inside. And as I stared at that note, my reflection walked in the glass door. I finally said the words out loud. He's been watching me my whole life. The discovery hit me on a Thursday, April 14, 2022. I had spent the morning buried in courthouse records, my laptop balanced on my lap while the smell of coffee burned my nostrils. I kept replaying the words my dad had said, "Benjamin handled your adoption." But now I had proof. The box under the floorboards wasn't everything. Hidden in a folder labelled Nathan D. Confidential were bank statements, property deeds, and a series of letters that Benjamin had written to lawyers and doctors, each meticulously orchestrating the lie of my life. He had forged signatures, altered dates, and even faked my mother's death certificate. I could barely breathe. It got worse. One of the letters contained details I hadn't even shared with my therapist. Benjamin had called Dr. Choi and requested confidential notes, citing medical necessity for guardianship. My doctor had given them my private nightmares, my panic attack triggers, even my therapy homework. I felt bile rise in my throat. He had weaponized my own trauma against me. Socially, things began to unravel immediately. My friends noticed I was disappearing in declining brunches, ghosting texts, flinching whenever someone entered the room. Whispers followed me. "Did you hear about Nathan?" The co-workers asked in passing, as if it were some tabloid scandal. The mail carrier left packages at the gate instead of the porch after I filed complaints, citing safety concern. Even my workplace became a minefield. HR called me enough as someone leaked parts of my adoption story internally. The rumour mill churned. Nathan's life is fake, isn't it? My reputation, carefully built over years of coding, late nights, and freelance projects, collapsed under the weight of betrayal. Then there was the legal mess. The adoption was technically valid, but Benjamin's falsifications triggered a wave of investigations. He had faked his death in 2010 to cover up criminal activity, embezzlement and identity theft, and police records now listed him as a suspect in multiple states. I remember the call from Detective Morales like it was yesterday. "Mr. D, we're going to need you to testify. It's complicated, but Benjamin's schemes were vast. He's been living under multiple aliases." I sank to the floor of my beach house, staring at the wedding dress and plastic hanging in the corner of my bedroom. The scent of baby powder hit me like a hammer. My grandmother had kept that dress safe for decades, a symbol of family, protection, trust. And Benjamin has stolen my entire family narrative. The secondary betrayal cut the deepest. My father, Dennis, had unknowingly enabled Benjamin. He'd signed papers, deferred to him, and silenced my questions over and over. Marlene, my aunt, had actively defended Benjamin. I realised now she had been excusing, covering, and rationalising every lie. It wasn't just the betrayal of one person. It was a betrayal of everyone who had ever trusted me. I started experiencing severe PTSD. Nightmares replayed Benjamin's voice, throw it away. Panic attacks came out of nowhere. My apartment smelled of baby powder, triggering flashbacks. I lost sleep for weeks, sometimes days. Therapy became my only lifeline. Dr. Troy recommended EMDR movement desensitization and reprocessing to rewire my trauma responses and spent months teaching me grounding techniques. Every session peeled back layers of fear. I had never truly trusted anyone because my earliest relationships were manipulations. My sense of self, the foundation of identity, had been built on deception. The community reaction was brutal. Neighbors whispered about my family drama. Friends hesitated to invite me to events, unsure how involved Benjamin had been. Even strangers at the beach would give me strange looks when they overheard snippets of my story. The financial toll was immediate. Benjamin had siphoned funds from my inheritance accounts. My bank accounts were frozen during the investigations. My $450 car payment, rent, groceries, everything became a crisis. I had to take out emergency loans and scrape by. Bankruptcy loomed on the horizon. But in the chaos, something unexpected happened. I found solidarity in other victims, people Benjamin had deceived in other states. Their testimonies were chilling: medical fraud, fake estates, identity theft. The abuse was broader than I ever imagined. I realized this wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was systemic. And that realization gave me a strange, cold clarity. I remember staring at my reflection that night, dark waves slapping against the beach house stilts. My eyes were rimmed with red, my hands shaking. I whispered into the mirror, I have to survive this, I have to find myself. That was the moment I decided not just to confront Benjamin, but to confront everything he had stolen from me. It was May 15, 2023, graduation day at the University of Miami. I had tried to prepare myself for months of therapy, grounding exercises, even late-night rehearsals in front of my bathroom mirror. But nothing could steal me for the moment Benjamin walked into the auditorium, smug as ever, claiming to be there to celebrate a family milestone. I spotted him immediately. His grey hair slicked back, navy blazer slightly too tight, hands folded casually. He glanced at me with that same fake warmth, like a puppet master admiring his marionette. The ceremony was dragging on his speeches about resilience, academic excellence. I felt my pulse hammering against my ribs like a drum. Sweat prickled my hairline despite the May sun outside. And then it was my turn. I walked to the podium, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped my diploma. I inhaled deeply, trying to summon the years of therapy that had taught me how to manage panic attacks. I have something to say, I began. My voice quavered, but I forced eye contact with Benjamin. The audience fell silent. Hundreds of people turned to watch. For 30 years, one man in my life has lied to me, stolen my inheritance, and controlled my identity. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Parents shifted uncomfortably. My father's hands went to his mouth. Marlene's face twisted in disbelief, then anger. That man, I continued, lifting my voice over the murmurs, faked my mother's death, intercepted my medical records, and even falsified my adoption document. Benjamin's smile faltered. I could see his jaw tighten. He whispered, but I ignored him. I gave him my trust, my time, and everything I had, and he left me with nothing. I said, my throat tight. But I finally know the truth of my life, my identity, and my family was stolen from me, and I'm taking it back. I pulled out the folder of documents from my bag of the adoption papers, letters, and bank statements and held them high. The auditorium went silent. The mail carrier, who had once left packages at the gate, was now a witness in my mind to the life Benjamin tried to manipulate. My father stumbled forward, his voice shaking. Nathan, I'm sorry, Dad, I said, cutting him off. But this is my moment. Benjamin's face turned pale. You have no idea what you're doing, he hissed. Actually, I said, my hands trembling but my resolve hardening. I've never been more certain in my life. The whispers around me grew louder. People were talking, pointing, snapping pictures. My friends, who had been cautiously supportive, were crying. I felt a strange sense of vindication. I wasn't just exposing Benjamin, I was reclaiming myself. Then came the final twist. One of the lawyers working with me pulled me aside afterward. Nathan, there's more, she said quietly. Your heritage, your biological family, there's a connection to a line of people who were wrongly written out of estate records. Benjamin hid it for decades. I sank to a nearby bench, staring at the ocean beyond the beach house. My mind reeled, hidden heritage, stolen identity, stolen inheritance. Every betrayal compounded the last. Benjamin tried to leave quietly, but campus security intercepted him. Police reports were filed. He was facing federal investigations across 3 states. Meanwhile, my father sat beside me, holding my hand for the first time in years without apology or excuse. I should have protected you, he murmured. You didn't know how, I said gently, letting a tear slide down my cheek. But I know now how to protect myself. That night, I returned to the beach house, exhausted but strangely awake. The wedding dress in plastic hung silently in the corner, now a relic of past deception. I touched it lightly, inhaling the faint scent of baby powder. It was no longer oppressive. It was a reminder that life could be reclaimed, pieced back together even after years of lies. I would need months of therapy to process everything in nightmares, panic attacks, severe trust issues, but standing on that stage had been the first real act of self-ownership I had done in my life. Benjamin could manipulate documents and doctors, but he couldn't manipulate me anymore. For the first time, I felt the faintest glimmer of hope. My life, my identity, my future were all mine. And it was just the beginning. After the graduation confrontation, my life didn't suddenly get easier. In fact, the next few months were the most brutal I've ever endured. Benjamin was in custody, facing federal investigations across 3 states, but the chaos he left behind fell squarely on me. The first shock was financial. The inheritance he had stolen wasn't recovered immediately. My savings had been siphoned into phantom accounts, and my $450 car payment became a cruel joke. I had to repossess my old Honda Civic and rely on rides from friends who themselves were stretched thin. Rent at the beach house was overdue. Groceries were skipped. I ate cold cereal for 3 days straight because the $20 I had in my account couldn't cover a bag of apples or a loaf of bread. At work, things fell apart too. Whispers and sideways glances became unbearable. My reputation had been dismantled by years of carefully hidden lies that Benjamin had woven into my professional and personal life. I was no longer Nathan, the competent developer. I was that guy whose life was a fraud. HR had me on probation for a performance dip, but I knew it was more about optics and code. The psychological toll was devastating. Nightmares became a nightly ritual. I dreamt Benjamin was in every room of my apartment, prying up floorboards, rifling through documents, whispering "throw it away." I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, and shaking so violently I couldn't hold my phone. Panic attacks became frequent. One morning, I even found myself curled on the bathroom floor, hyperventilating, convinced that someone had entered my apartment while I slept. Dr. Choi doubled my sessions. EMDR and grounding exercises helped, but the emotional wounds were deep. Months of therapy were required just to sleep through the night without waking in terror. Trust issues grew sharper. I couldn't ask a friend to pick up groceries without anxiety. I flinched when anyone touched my belongings. Even the sound of baby powder made my chest tighten because it reminded me of Benjamin's pervasive control. Socially, I was isolated. Friends pulled away, unsure how to engage with someone whose life had been so publicly dismantled. At the local coffee shop, baristas whispered, "Isn't he that guy?" Strangers avoided eye contact. The mail carrier refused to deliver to my door, leaving packages at the gate. It was like the world had become an echo chamber of shame. Even my family was fractured. Dennis was racked with guilt, unable to make amends for years of unknowingly enabling Benjamin. Maureen, my aunt, continued to defend him, insisting he had meant well and that I was overreacting. Their inability to validate my pain left me feeling utterly alone. Police investigations brought legal stress on top of everything. I spent hours in meetings, providing statements, signing affidavits, and traveling cross counties. Each phone call was a reminder of the life Benjamin had stolen. I was constantly reminded that he had faked his death in 2010, had stolen identities, and had manipulated professionals across multiple states. Every new discovery sent me spiraling deeper into despair. There were moments when I considered giving up. Lying on the floor of my bedroom, staring at the wedding dress in plastic, I asked myself if I'd ever reclaim my life. I felt bankrupt emotionally, socially, and financially. The beach house, once a place of calm, now smelled of lingering baby powder, an invisible marker of betrayal. Even therapy felt exhausting. Each session uncovered new layers of mistrust. Doctors had betrayed me. Family members had betrayed me. Even the people I confided in could not undo the past. I felt wired, and my brain constantly scanning for threats, unable to relax, unable to feel safe. Yet, even in the rock bottom, I noticed a spark. Small things, a blank canvas in the corner of the apartment, a notebook with my sketches from childhood, the ocean visible through the window reminded me of the part of me Benjamin hadn't touched. I realized that recovery wouldn't be quick, but it would require reclaiming not just my life, but my sense of self. I promised myself that night, as the tide pounded against the stilts of the beach house, that I would survive. That I would rebuild, not just financially, but emotionally. That I would find a way to turn this trauma into something tangible, something mine. The turning point came in early 2024. After months of therapy, EMDR sessions, and grounding exercises, I realized I couldn't simply return to normal. Benjamin had stolen not just my inheritance, but my sense of self, and reclaiming that required a new approach. I turned to art, painting, sketching, and eventually sculpting. It was messy, raw, and completely mine. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt a sense of control. I started small. A canvas in the corner of my apartment became my nightly ritual. I painted my nightmares first, shadows of Benjamin's grin, floorboards prying open under my hands, the smell of baby powder lingering in every brushstroke. First pieces were terrifying to look at, but they forced me to confront my trauma instead of letting it control me. Therapy continued alongside my art. Dr. Choi encouraged me to journal every day, noting triggers, moments of panic, and small victories. I learned to identify the physical signs of stress, the tightening of my chest, shallow breathing, racing heart. I combined this awareness with my creative work, turning each panic episode into a sketch, a sculpture. It became a language I could understand. Financially, I clawed my way back. I took freelance projects, carefully budgeting around my $450 car payment and the rent for the beach house. The inheritance tied up in legal proceedings finally started to release, and I learned to handle the funds with my own oversight. Each deposit felt like a tiny victory, proof that Benjamin's manipulation no longer dictated my life. Socially, rebuilding trust was harder. I reached out to friends cautiously, explaining my story in pieces, testing whether they could listen without judgment. Some walked away, others returned stronger than ever. I even reconnected with neighbours who had whispered during the scandal. Once they saw me taking steps to reclaim my life, they offered support. The mail carrier, who had once left packages at the gate, now handed them to me directly with a small, empathetic nod. One of the most profound steps was reconnecting with my father. Dennis and I began attending joint therapy sessions, unpacking decades of unintentional enabling and miscommunication. For the first time, we had honest conversations about Benjamin, adoption, and the layers of betrayal that had shaped my life. "I want to see you happy, Nathan," he said one evening, voice cracking. "Even if I can't fix the past, I want to be here for the future." By the fall, I had my first solo art exhibition. The centerpiece was a sculpture titled Hidden Floors, a raw, twisted representation of the floorboard where Benjamin had hidden my adoption papers. The piece smelled faintly of baby powder. I had deliberately incorporated it, reclaiming the scent that once terrified me. People who attended cried, whispered, and shared their own stories of betrayal and resilience. I realized that my pain could be transformed into something meaningful, something that connected me with others instead of isolating me. I also began writing a journal that I eventually planned to turn into a memoir. Each entry detailed not just the betrayal, but the recovery, the EMDR sessions, the late night paintings, the tiny victories like sleeping through a storm or having dinner with friends without anxiety. I wanted my story to be a map for others lost in similar darkness. Now, at 25, I look back at the beach house and the chaos Benjamin caused with a strange sense of gratitude. Not for the abuse itself, but for the way it forced me to discover who I truly am. I've reconnected with my biological roots, reclaimed my inheritance and, most importantly, reclaimed my mind. Trust issues remain, but I've learned to recognize them and work through them instead of letting them control me. The wedding dress in plastic still hangs in my grandmother's old closet, untouched but no longer a symbol of fear. The smell of baby powder now feels like memory rather than manipulation. The ocean still crashes against the stilts of the beach house, but I no longer flinch at the sound. I am Nathan, not Benjamin's puppet, not a victim of identity theft, not a man defined by betrayal. I am an artist, a survivor, a person who rebuilt himself from the ruins of deception, who reclaimed life, identity, and self-respect one brushstroke at a time. And for the first time in decades, I sleep through the night, dreaming not of betrayal, but of possibility.